Chapter 1. The Arrival. On the planet of Recorus, the alien world where the sun bathed its surface in a perpetual twilight, everything felt different from Earth. A massive sphere, teeming with life and mysteries. Recorus had long since been a place where the human race had been fascinated by its violent natural beauty, its breathtaking biomes, and, of course, the indigenous species that ruled the land, particularly its apex predators, beasts so ferocious, so incredibly strong, that even the most daring of Recorian adventurers had learned to respect them. These creatures, towering and brutal, were a symbol of the planet's wild heart. Their presence hung over Recorus like a dark, unspoken truth that everyone who lived there accepted. The human delegation had arrived on Recorus with no small amount of trepidation, eager to learn from its resources, but not entirely certain of what awaited them in the depths of its uncharted forests and deserts. Their mission was one of discovery, of scientific exploration, and yet they couldn't help but notice the tension that seemed to permeate the air. The Recorian people were strangely quiet around them, their eyes always darting toward the shadowy peripheries of their cities, where they swore monstrous figures roamed freely. What many humans did not know, however, was that these apex predators weren't just mythical beasts of nightmares. They were the focal point of Recorian mythology, gods in their own right, but also the true rulers of the wilderness that sprawled across the planet. Their presence was so pervasive that it even influenced Recorian culture, leaving an indelible mark on the way they structured their society, their politics, and their daily lives. It was on a cool, misty evening when this strange world of contradictions would begin to make itself known to human First Officer Eleanor Harris, the leader of the Earth delegation. She had arrived on Recorus several months prior to begin establishing peaceful relations, yet the mysteries of the planet still eluded her. Her team was charged with studying the wildlife and gaining insight into the technology that had allowed the Recorian people to thrive in such a hostile world. Yet, despite all their advanced scientific methods, Eleanor's team had found themselves thwarted time and again by the planet's wild terrain and the sheer unpredictability of its apex predators. These were creatures of such raw power and brutal instincts that every attempt to track or document them had ended with failure, leaving the humans on edge as they ventured deeper into Recorus wilderness. It was a silent truth they couldn't ignore. They were trespassing in a place ruled by things far older and far more dangerous than themselves. But it wasn't until a fateful morning, when Eleanor and her team decided to venture farther into the wilds, that they encountered what they would later call the Beast, creatures so terrifying, so beyond anything they had ever encountered, that it would forever alter the way they viewed Recorus and the creatures that ruled it. Eleanor and her team had come across a clearing, nestled within the dense forest of Recorus' northern reaches. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, the distant calls of unknown creatures echoing in the distance. Their boots squelched in the wet grass as they made their way through the thick underbrush, their instruments scanning the area for any signs of wildlife. Suddenly, without warning, a low rumble reverberated through the ground, and Eleanor stopped in her tracks, her hand instinctively reaching for her communicator. "Everyone, hold up," she ordered, her voice sharp with concern. The rumble deepened, a thunderous growl that seemed to shake the very air around them. The hairs on the back of Eleanor's neck stood on end, and she felt a chill run through her body. The ground trembled again, this time with more force, and she felt the unmistakable presence of something large, something powerful, nearby. "Everyone, back up slowly," Eleanor commanded, her voice low but urgent. Her team exchanged nervous glances but obeyed her order, taking slow, deliberate steps backward as the growl grew louder, closer. Something was coming, and it was enormous. It was only when the brush parted in front of them that they saw it, a hulking, terrifying creature that seemed to emerge from the shadows of the forest like a nightmare given form. The creature stood at least 12 feet tall, its muscles rippling beneath dark, scaly skin, and its head was adorned with jagged horns that curved upward, as if designed for nothing less than pure intimidation. Its eyes, bright and fierce, glowed with a predatory intelligence that made every human on the team take a step back. The beast's jaw hung slightly open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light, and its massive claws scraped against the earth as it shifted its weight, preparing to charge. The air was thick with the scent of adrenaline, both human and beast, as they faced off in the eerie silence of the forest. The team froze, unsure of what to do. They had never encountered anything like this before. Eleanor's heart raced in her chest as she assessed the situation. Every instinct told her to run, to retreat, but she knew that would only provoke the creature. Her mind raced, weighing the options, the variables. What was this creature? Was it truly one of the apex predators the Ricorian people had warned them about? And most importantly, would it attack? Then, as if the beast could sense her uncertainty, it lunged forward, but instead of charging aggressively, it stopped mere feet in front of Eleanor. For a moment, the beast's glowing eyes locked onto hers, and she felt an odd stillness wash over her. There was no roar, no hiss of fury. Instead, it seemed to wait, watching her closely as though gauging her every move. Eleanor held her breath, unsure of what to do. She was a trained officer, but nothing had prepared her for this creature that was clearly intelligent, yet somehow not acting in the way she had expected. In that moment, she realized that she wasn't just staring down an apex predator. She was staring into the eyes of something far more complex than she could have ever imagined. The beast took a slow step forward, its massive footfall barely making a sound as it moved closer to her. But as it did, it lowered its head, its sharp horns coming dangerously close to her chest. Eleanor's eyes widened, and she instinctively stepped backward, but the creature did not follow. Instead, it seemed to pause for a moment, its eyes softening slightly, as though considering her actions. Eleanor blinked, completely bewildered. How could this be happening? How was the creature, this apex predator, reacting this way? Then, a voice interrupted her thoughts, one that was soft but filled with authority. Do not move. The voice belonged to Kira, an alien girl who had accompanied the human delegation to Ricorius as a cultural liaison. She was young, barely 16, but her understanding of Ricorian wildlife and customs far surpassed any humans. She had spent her life studying the creatures of Ricorius, and her family had long been known for their work in understanding the deeper intricacies of the planet's ecosystem. Kira stepped forward from the shadows, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the tense atmosphere. The creature, still fixated on Eleanor, did not seem startled by Kira's appearance. Instead, its massive head turned slightly toward the young alien, as if it recognized her, its eyes now radiating a level of recognition that left Eleanor stunned. Kira's gaze met the beast's, and in a voice that seemed to resonate with ancient power, she spoke again. He won't harm you, not unless you threaten him. Eleanor was frozen. How did Kira know this? Was it possible that Kira had some special connection to the beast? She hadn't seen the girl take any special action to calm the creature, yet it seemed as though the beast was listening to her. Kira stepped even closer to the creature, her hand outstretched as she approached its massive, scaled body. The beast made no move to retaliate. In fact, it allowed Kira to stroke the side of its neck with one hand. This one's name is Korath, Kira said, her voice soft but filled with confidence. He is an apex predator of Ricorius, but he is not just a beast. He has been tamed, trained by my people to serve as a guardian and protector. Eleanor stared at her, unable to comprehend what was happening. Tamed? You mean this beast has been trained? Kira nodded, her expression serene as she continued to gently stroke the dragon-like creature's scales. Yes, though it is rare. Most Ricorian creatures of his kind cannot be tamed. But Korath has learned to work with us, to understand our needs. Eleanor's mind was spinning. This creature, this terrifying apex predator, wasn't a mindless killing machine. It had been trained. And Kira, an alien girl no older than a human child, had somehow formed a bond with it. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. What she had just witnessed wasn't just the interaction between a human and a deadly beast. It was the beginning of something entirely new. Korath wasn't a threat. It was a partner. It was something more than just a weapon of nature. And Kira had proven that it was possible to communicate with these creatures, to tame them, to turn them into something far greater than just beasts of destruction. You're saying that this creature could be used to protect, not to destroy? Eleanor asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Kira nodded again. Yes, Korath, like others of his kind, has been trained to understand us. He can be a protector, a guardian, not just an apex predator. He can be our ally. Eleanor took a slow step forward, her eyes never leaving Korath. The beast's gaze met hers once more, and this time, there was no fear in its eyes, only a quiet intelligence. For the first time, Eleanor realized that the true challenge they faced on Recorus was not to survive the apex predators, it was to understand them, to learn how to live alongside them, to tame the wild forces of the planet instead of fearing them. The moment had shifted, and Eleanor knew that from here on out, Recorus would never be the same. The apex predators of this planet weren't just threats to be destroyed, they were creatures with their own hearts, their own minds. And perhaps, just perhaps, the future of this world could be different. The reality of what was happening slowly started to settle in. Karath, this colossal beast, this apex predator of Recorus, wasn't an enemy. Instead of charging at them, ready to destroy, it was calm, almost docile, standing still as Kira approached it with such familiarity and ease that it was as though they had been communicating for years. Eleanor, still in shock, could hardly comprehend how this was possible. The beast was larger than any dragon or creature she had ever seen on Earth. Its claws could slice through steel with ease, its fangs capable of crushing bone with a single bite, and yet it seemed to be responding to Kira, to this young alien girl, in a way that suggested it trusted her completely. She couldn't fathom how this level of control was possible. The Recorian people, by their very nature, were not to be underestimated. They were intelligent, resourceful, and had developed technologies far beyond Earth's capabilities. But Kira, this young girl who had barely been on the delegation for more than a few months, was doing something the humans couldn't even begin to understand. She was befriending a beast that had been feared by the entire planet. And in that moment, Eleanor realized that this was not just a victory for Kira, it was a lesson for humanity. They had come to Recorus to learn, to study, but what they were truly here for was to understand. Not just the planet's resources, or its wildlife, but the delicate balance between the creatures and the Recorian people. For years, they had feared the unknown, trembling in awe of the planet's apex predators. But now, standing before her, Eleanor saw what was possible in understanding, a partnership that transcended the simple fear of these beasts. Karatha's body seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, the golden scales shimmering as though they were reacting to Kira's touch. The beast's enormous tail swayed slowly, almost lazily, as it took in the surroundings. The atmosphere had shifted from tense fear to something else entirely: curiosity, fascination, and even reverence. Eleanor stepped forward cautiously, unsure of what to make of all of this. Her eyes met Kira's, who was still stroking Karatha's side with a calm, practiced hand. The young Recorian girl smiled, a look of serene contentment on her face. "You see," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself, "the true power of these creatures isn't in their strength or their ferocity. It's in their loyalty. Karath is not a weapon. He is a guardian, a protector. And with the right bond, with the right understanding, these creatures can protect us as we protect them." Eleanor's mind reeled. How was it possible? How could a creature so powerful, so dangerous, and so inherently wild be tamed? The answer lay, perhaps, in the ancient history of the Recorian people, something that only Kira truly understood. The Recorian civilization had a long history with these beasts. They weren't simply enemies to be destroyed, nor were they mindless animals. They were partners in a larger ecosystem, one that depended on balance, respect, and understanding. Kira's family had spent generations learning how to tame the wildest of the planet's creatures, to communicate with them in ways the humans couldn't even dream of. And in that moment, Eleanor realized that this young girl, this alien girl, was more than just a liaison between Earth and Recorus. She was a bridge between two worlds, a key to understanding the deepest, most profound mysteries of the planet. Karath let out a soft growl, more of a contented hum than anything else, and Kira's smile widened. "He's accepting you," she said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. "The bond between humans and Recorian creatures can be forged, just like between any two species. You have to listen, understand, and offer trust. That's all." Eleanor could hardly believe what she was hearing. This beast, this mighty, terrifying creature was not only tame, but it was actively responding to her, as if it recognized something in her, something beyond her appearance. Was it possible that the animals of Recorus, all of them, had this potential? Could humans learn to coexist with them in this way, to bond with them? Or was Karath an anomaly? Kira stepped away from the beast, her hand still resting gently on its side as she addressed Eleanor, her eyes filled with quiet wisdom. "You're afraid," she said, her tone gentle. "But you don't need to be. Karath is not like the others, the ones that roam the wilds, terrorizing villages. Those are creatures that have lost the bond with us, with the Ricorian people. They've lived for too long outside the boundaries of our understanding. But Karath, he was chosen. He chose me, and now he chooses you. The bond we share with these creatures is a gift, but it is also a responsibility. Eleanor nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything Kira was saying. What responsibility? She asked, her voice soft, filled with the weight of her own uncertainties. What happens now? Kira's eyes softened, the corners of her mouth turning upward in a faint smile. We protect them, Eleanor. And they protect us. We show them respect, and they'll return it 1,000-fold. She turned back to Karath, whose golden eyes glimmered as it nuzzled Kira gently. We can help each other. We just need to understand each other first. Eleanor's heart swelled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The complexity of the situation was almost overwhelming. They had come to Ricorius expecting to discover resources, to study the planet's biology, to understand the technology of the Ricorian people. But now, Eleanor saw that this journey had become something far more profound. It wasn't just about collecting data or resources, it was about truly understanding the balance of nature, the way different species could coexist and benefit from one another. And now, she was part of it. She looked up at Karath, the immense creature who stood still beside Kira, its massive form a testament to the power and beauty of Ricorius. So, Eleanor said, finally finding her voice, we're not here to conquer. We're here to learn. Kira nodded. Exactly. And by learning, we're not only helping the creatures of Ricorius, but ourselves as well. We'll never truly understand this world until we understand its creatures, the apex predators, and all the others. We are all part of the same ecosystem. Eleanor's mind churned as she processed Kira's words. There was so much more to learn, so much more to uncover. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The relationship between humans and the creatures of Ricorius had the potential to change everything, to build a future that was built on cooperation, not fear. And for the first time since they had arrived on Ricorius, Eleanor felt hope. The creature that had once seemed to be a symbol of humanity's fear was now a symbol of their future. It was no longer the enemy, it was a partner. And it was time to forge a new path forward. Chapter 2. The Understanding. The days that followed Karath's awakening were filled with a new sense of purpose for Eleanor and her team. The questions that had plagued their mission from the very beginning about the Ricorian wildlife, their behavior, and the nature of the planet's ecosystem now seemed to have clearer answers. It was Kira, more than anyone else, who led them in understanding the creatures of Ricorius. She had the wisdom of generations, the knowledge passed down in her family about how to connect with the animals and establish a mutual respect. It was evident that these creatures, while dangerous, were not mindless beasts of destruction. They were complex, intelligent beings, capable of communication, of understanding, and of partnership. Eleanor spent hours with Kira, learning the subtleties of Ricorian wildlife, particularly the apex predators. They weren't just mindless killers, they had personalities, instincts, and temperaments, much like any other species. And the key to interacting with them, to coexisting with them, was simple: respect. Eleanor realized that this was not just about taming the beasts, it was about building relationships with them, about acknowledging that they were equal parts of the planet's intricate web of life. As days turned into weeks, Eleanor's team began to integrate with the Ricorian ways. They studied the creatures alongside Kira, learning their behaviors, their movements, and how the Ricorian people had managed to live with them for so long. The once terrifying predators, those that had been relegated to the status of mythical monsters, were now becoming subjects of study, subjects of reverence. Eleanor was astounded by how quickly the bond between Kira and Karath grew. The two were inseparable, the dragon-like creature following Kira wherever she went. It had become more than a partner, it had become her companion, a protector in its own right. Eleanor, too, began to understand the creatures better, seeing them not as threats, but as part of the natural order. She spent hours with Kira, sitting silently in the forests, observing the animals, learning from them. What she learned changed her understanding of Ricorius and its creatures forever. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to learn. And in that learning, there was power that came not from control, but from coexistence. The next few weeks passed in a blur of study and exploration. The team discovered more and more about the relationship between the Ricorian people and their creatures, and Eleanor could see how the Ricorian society had evolved to support such a bond. The apex predators were not merely pets or tools. They were partners, guardians, and friends. The Ricorian people had cultivated a deep respect for these creatures, understanding that true harmony could only be achieved when both the people and the beasts lived side by side, each contributing to the balance of the ecosystem. But there were still many questions left unanswered. Why had the Ricorian people allowed the apex predators to fall into near extinction? What had happened to the other creatures that once roamed freely alongside them? And, most importantly, could humans live alongside these creatures, just as the Ricorian people had done? Eleanor knew that the answers to these questions were vital, not just for Ricoris, but for the future of Earth's relationship with alien worlds. And so, with Kira's guidance and the newfound bond with the apex predator, Eleanor and her team began to understand a new kind of mission, one that wasn't about conquering or controlling, but about learning, understanding, and living in partnership with the powerful creatures of Ricoris. The weeks that followed their first encounter with Karath were filled with revelations that changed the course of the mission entirely. The once daunting, almost mythical creatures that had intimidated the humans from the moment they arrived on Ricoris now became the key to a new understanding, a profound connection with the planet's ecosystem. With Kira's guidance, the humans began to grasp the complexities of Ricoris wildlife, and most importantly, they began to see the apex predators not as enemies, but as equals, integral to the planet's delicate balance. Eleanor spent countless hours with Kira, learning everything she could about the Ricorian way of life. The first lesson, as Kira had taught her, was one of respect. In the wilds of Ricoris, Kira explained, the strongest survive, yes, but the truly powerful creatures are those who understand the ecosystem they are part of. It is not about dominance, but about balance. The apex predators protect the fragile web of life that sustains us all. Eleanor found herself fascinated by this worldview. It was so different from the human approach, which often equated power with domination and control. On Earth, apex predators were studied, tracked, and feared, with the human instinct often being to eliminate or control what they didn't understand. But here, in the wilderness of Ricoris, the creatures coexisted in a system that had worked for millennia. Karath, the massive beast they had encountered earlier, was not a mindless killer. He was part of this delicate balance, an ancient being whose role had shaped the environment around him. And Kira had found a way to communicate with him not through force, but through understanding and empathy. As Eleanor spent more time observing Karath and the other apex predators, she began to see the wisdom in Kira's words. Karath wasn't simply a weapon or a threat to be neutralized. He was a guardian of the wilds, a protector of the delicate ecosystems of Ricoris. The Ricorian people had developed a deep connection with these creatures, understanding their behaviors, their needs, and their place in the greater ecological order. Through this bond, the Ricorian people had learned how to coexist with the wilds, to respect the creatures that roamed the forests, the plains, and the skies. It was a lesson that the humans had never learned on Earth, a way of thinking that transcended traditional human approaches to nature. But not all humans were ready to embrace this new perspective. While Eleanor and her team were fascinated by the possibility of living alongside Ricoris creatures, not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. Some members of the delegation, particularly the more scientific and militaristic-minded individuals, were resistant to the idea of taming apex predators or forming bonds with them. The idea of coexistence felt too foreign, too risky. They had come to Ricoris to study the planet's resources and gain access to its technology, not to foster relationships with the dangerous wildlife that inhabited it. Tensions were beginning to rise within the delegation, especially when the conversation turned to the future of their mission. Some argued that the relationship with the apex predators was simply a temporary curiosity and experiment that would fail once the reality of living among such dangerous creatures set in. Others, like Eleanor, saw it as an opportunity to change their approach to planetary exploration, to learn, to adapt, and to live alongside the planet's natural inhabitants, not above them. One afternoon, Eleanor found herself standing in the middle of the forest with Kira, watching as Karath and another apex predator, a massive creature with scales that shimmered like the night sky, moved gracefully through the trees. The two creatures moved with such ease, as if they were part of the very forest itself, their powerful limbs swaying effortlessly as they navigated the dense underbrush. Do you think we could live like this? Eleanor asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the creatures. Live with them, not above them. Kira smiled softly, her eyes distant, as if recalling the past. I believe you could, she said, but it requires a change in how you see the world. It's not about conquering it or controlling it, it's about respecting it. Understanding that the world is not ours to dominate, but ours to share. The Ricorian people have learned this, and it's why we've survived for so long. Eleanor nodded slowly, the weight of Kira's words settling in. It wasn't just about studying the apex predators. It was about changing the very way humanity interacted with the natural world. She could see the potential for cooperation, for collaboration. If humans could learn to coexist with the creatures of Ricorus, perhaps they could bring this new way of thinking back to Earth. The possibilities were endless. But not everyone was ready to accept this shift. The delegation's leadership, particularly Commander Thomas Graves, had made his opposition clear. Graves was an ambitious leader who saw the mission to Ricorus as a way to establish Earth's dominance over new worlds, a way to expand humanity's reach into the stars. He viewed the apex predators as obstacles to be overcome, not creatures to be understood. His vision for Ricorus was one of resource exploitation and military power, not one of peaceful coexistence. These creatures are dangerous, Graves had said in a recent meeting, his voice sharp and dismissive. We can't afford to romanticize them. They're a threat to our mission, and I'm not about to let a bunch of overgrown lizards stand in the way of what we came here for. If we're going to make any progress on Ricorus, we need to deal with these beasts, tame them, or eliminate them if necessary. Eleanor had tried to argue, but the tension in the room was palpable. She could see that Graves was determined, unwilling to entertain any other option. His vision of Ricorus was one of control and subjugation, and Eleanor knew that unless she could convince him otherwise, the future of their mission and perhaps their relationship with the Ricorian people was in jeopardy. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mist rolled over the landscape, Eleanor sat outside her tent, her thoughts heavy with the weight of the decisions ahead. The stars above her seemed distant, cold, and uncaring, like the choices she had to make. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: humanity's future on Ricorus, and perhaps even its future beyond, depended on their ability to understand and adapt to the wild, untamed world around them. It wasn't just about conquering the unknown, it was about learning to live with it. And for the first time, Eleanor realized that perhaps that was the greatest challenge of all. Chapter 3: A New Bond. The tension that had been building between the humans and the Ricorian creatures had reached a boiling point. With the leadership divided over how to handle the apex predators, the delegation was on the verge of a conflict that could unravel everything they had worked for. Commander Graves, whose vision of humanity's role in the galaxy revolved around domination and control, was becoming more vocal in his opposition to the idea of coexistence with the planet's wildlife. Eleanor, on the other hand, felt more strongly than ever that their survival on Ricorus depended on embracing a new paradigm, one built on respect, understanding, and collaboration with the creatures of the planet. The tension between these two ideologies came to a head during a critical meeting held at the camp headquarters. Eleanor and Kira had spent days preparing a proposal that would allow the humans to coexist with the apex predators, a plan that would involve creating a sanctuary where humans and Ricorian wildlife could interact peacefully. They had gathered evidence from their studies, including detailed observations of Karatha's behavior and the ways in which the creatures communicated with each other. It was a proposal that could change everything: the way humans approached alien worlds, the way they interacted with nature, but it required Graves' approval to move forward. Eleanor stood before the council of leaders, her heart pounding as she presented their findings. She spoke passionately about the importance of living in harmony with Ricorus wildlife, highlighting the ways in which the Ricorian people had forged bonds with these creatures over the centuries. She spoke about Karath, about the trust he had shown her and Kira, and about the potential for peaceful coexistence that had never before been explored. Her words were filled with hope, but they were also filled with an undeniable urgency. The planet of Ricorus could be the key to unlocking a new way of thinking, one that could shape humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Graves, however, was unmoved. He sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed, his expression stern. "I'm not interested in your idealistic fantasies, Eleanor," he said, his voice cold. "We're not here to make friends with overgrown lizards. We're here to establish dominance, to claim this world for humanity. These creatures are a threat to that goal, and I won't stand by while we waste time trying to understand them. If we don't assert control now, we'll lose our chance to capitalize on the resources this planet offers. Eleanor felt a surge of frustration, but she didn't back down. We're not here to conquer Recorus, Graves, she said, her voice firm. We're here to learn. We've already seen the benefits of working alongside the Recorian creatures. Karath, this apex predator, has shown us that we don't have to fear them. We can work with them. Graves stood, his fists clenched at his sides. You're dreaming, Eleanor. This isn't about working with them, it's about control. We have to secure this planet, or the Recorian people will see us as weak. And if we're weak, we won't survive. This is a dangerous place. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of Graves' words hanging heavy in the air. Eleanor's heart raced as she searched for the right words. She knew the stakes were high. She knew that the future of humanity's mission on Recorus and perhaps even the future of humanity itself was at risk. But she couldn't let Graves win. Not this time. If we don't learn to coexist, we'll repeat the same mistakes we made on Earth, Eleanor said quietly, her voice unwavering. And I won't be part of that. For a moment, no one spoke. The council members exchanged glances, uncertain of how to proceed. But Eleanor, resolute in her belief, knew that her path forward was clear. If they didn't change their approach, Recorus would be lost to them forever. And it wasn't just about the planet's future, it was about theirs as well. The tension in the room was unbearable. Graves stood at the head of the table, staring at Eleanor with an expression that was a mix of disbelief and disdain. The council members around the table exchanged nervous glances, uncertain how to respond to the clash of ideologies. For a moment, the silence was oppressive, the weight of their futures pressing down on them. It was clear that the direction they chose today would define the trajectory of humanity's relationship with Recorus and, ultimately, their place in the universe. Eleanor stood her ground, her back straight and her gaze unwavering as she met Graves' eyes. This was no longer about a single mission or one planet. It was about a paradigm shift, a fundamental rethinking of how humanity approached the cosmos, a shift from conquest to coexistence. The weight of what she was about to say hung heavy in the air, but she could not, would not, let fear control their path. We're standing at the edge of something extraordinary, Graves, she said, her voice steady. And if you can't see that, then we might as well turn our backs and leave now. Because this isn't about conquering Recorus, it's about understanding it. And if we can't respect the creatures that share this planet with us, then we don't deserve to be here in the first place. Graves' jaw tightened, and his fists clenched. He was a man who believed in power, who believed in taking what was needed. He had spent his entire life navigating a world that valued strength and dominance, and now, the notion of using empathy and respect as tools of diplomacy seemed impossible to him. But even as he fumed, Eleanor could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the slightest hesitation that suggested he wasn't as sure of his position as he appeared to be. The room was still, as if waiting for something to break the silence. And then, it was Kira's voice that cut through the tension, calm and steady. You think these creatures are a threat, she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of years spent learning to live alongside the wilds of Recorus. But they are not. The true threat is our failure to understand them, to coexist with them. If we push them away, if we continue to treat them as obstacles, then we will never know what Recorus truly has to offer. You will never know the power of living in harmony with the creatures of this planet. Kira's words, simple but profound, echoed through the room. It was as though the weight of her experience was speaking directly to the heart of the issue. She had spent years learning from her people and from the creatures of Recorus, and in that moment, she embodied everything that Eleanor had come to believe. There was no simple answer, no easy solution. The future of Recorus, the future of humanity on this planet, was not about conquest, it was about respect. Respect for the planet and its creatures, for the delicate balance that had existed long before the humans arrived. Graves stood silently for a long moment, his eyes flicking between Kira and Eleanor. His lips pressed into a thin line, and Eleanor could feel the weight of his struggle. He wanted control, but somewhere, deep down, he knew Kira and Eleanor were right. It wasn't about domination. It was about partnership. He didn't have to like it, but he had to accept it. Finally, with a long, heavy sigh, Graves dropped his shoulders and turned toward the council members. Fine, he said, his voice quieter now, but still filled with frustration. We'll try it your way. But mark my words, if this goes south, if these creatures turn on us, it will be your responsibility. Eleanor nodded, not out of victory, but out of understanding. I accept that, she said. And if we succeed, it will be all of ours. Together, Graves reluctantly sat down, and the tension in the room began to lift. The council members slowly nodded, their uncertainty still present but tempered by the gravity of the decision they had just made. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a step forward. And sometimes, that was all they could ask for. Chapter 4. A New Beginning. The weeks that followed the tense meeting were filled with activity and careful planning. Eleanor, Kira, and the rest of the delegation set to work on a comprehensive strategy for integrating the apex predators into the scientific study of Recorus. It wasn't just about taming the creatures, it was about understanding their role in the ecosystem, their interactions with other species, and how humanity could coexist with them without disrupting the delicate balance of the planet. Kira took the lead, guiding the humans in learning the subtle ways in which the creatures communicated. She taught them how to approach the beasts without fear, how to observe their behavior, and how to earn their trust. It wasn't easy. Many of the creatures, particularly the younger ones, were still wary of humans. But slowly, over time, Eleanor and the team began to make progress. They learned to use sound, body language, and even scent to communicate with the beasts, establishing a connection based on mutual respect. Karath, the massive apex predator who had first shocked Eleanor, became an integral part of their studies. He was a gentle giant, an incredible creature who exhibited a remarkable level of intelligence and emotional depth. He interacted with Kira like a trusted companion, responding to her gestures and commands with an understanding that went beyond the simple instincts of a predator. The bond between Kira and Karath grew stronger every day, and it was clear that they were more than just allies. They were a testament to the potential for peace between species. As the team continued to study the creatures, they began to uncover more about the ecosystem of Recorus. The apex predators were not mindless killers, as they had once assumed. They played an essential role in maintaining the balance of the planet, keeping other species in check and ensuring the health of the environment. They were not there to destroy, but to protect the planet's fragile ecosystem. By understanding this, the delegation was able to begin reshaping their mission, focusing not just on scientific discovery, but on building a lasting relationship with Recorus that could benefit both humans and the indigenous creatures. But even as they made progress, challenges arose. Not all of the Recorian people were as accepting of the idea of humans working with the apex predators. There were still factions within their society that viewed the creatures with suspicion, especially those who feared that humanity's presence on the planet would disrupt the balance. There were protests, demonstrations, and whispers of rebellion. Some believed that the Recorian people were losing their strength, their place as rulers of the land, by allowing the humans to gain such access to the creatures. Eleanor and Kira worked tirelessly to bridge the gap, to show the Recorian people that they weren't here to take over, but to share in the knowledge and the beauty of Recorus. They held discussions, met with leaders, and worked to create an alliance that would benefit both species. It wasn't an easy task, but slowly, with time, they began to win the trust of the people. One evening, as the sun set over the towering peaks of Recorus, Eleanor stood outside her tent, watching as Karath and Kira played together in the distance. The dragon-like creature galloped gracefully through the grass, its massive body moving with fluidity and strength. Kira laughed as she rode on Karath's back, her dark hair flying in the wind. The sight was one of harmony, one of partnership, and it filled Eleanor's heart with hope. They had come to Recorus with the intent of studying its wildlife, its technology, and its resources. They had come to claim what they could for humanity. But now, standing on the edge of the wilds, Eleanor realized that they had found something far more valuable. They had found a future where humans and the creatures of Recorus could coexist, learn from one another, and thrive together. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Eleanor turned back to the camp, her heart lighter than it had been in days. There was still work to be done, challenges to overcome, but for the first time since arriving on Recorus, she felt a deep sense of peace. They had found a way forward, a way to live in harmony with the wild, untamed world of Recorus. And in doing so, they had found a new understanding of themselves. Recorus was no longer just a planet to be conquered. It was a world to be understood, to be protected, and to be shared.